with all the talk of the PlayStation 5 Pro lately, has made me think about the consoles of yesteryear. What would a theoretical PlayStation 3 Pro look like? I'll tell you what, Chad Warden would have loved it. That's all I can say. Could Sony in the years between PS3 and PS4 manage to quote unquote upgrade the cell processor somehow? Well, I don't. Yeah, that's not really. Well, it is an issue, but I think ultimately one of the main reasons that the PS3 had issues is that the GPU just wasn't good enough, and I guess that would have been something they could have looked at. I guess the issue there is that obviously, you'd think to yourself, well, they've got an NVIDIA graphics chip, they could just go to G80 and, it would be a completely game-changing upgrade for a pro console. But then I guess you'd be looking at things which we suspect it holds back the PlayStation 5 Pro to a certain extent where, the shader code would be completely different.
Right.
Which is probably why we've got a 16.7 teraflop GPU that's likely sort of existing RDNA rather than brand spanking new RDNA. That's unconfirmed, but I suspect that would be the main reason that would hold back a PlayStation 3 Pro from just using a much better GPU. So they'd have to actually use the same older technology, and that probably isn't great either.
Yeah, just like they would double the shader engines, pixel shaders, vertex shaders, because it was already kind of a stripped down version of, what was it, G70 at that point?
Yeah, it would be. Yeah, it would be.
They could have done
like
that. I think the big thing for the PS3 also would have been increasing the split memory, because they had memory issues on PS3 as well.
Good point.
Like just doubling those respectively would be probably a big deal. Increasing memory bandwidth would also in those. I swear everything like for those systems, like Xbox 360 was better, but it was still so constrained in many ways. Just even like increasing bandwidth on the GPU would make a lot of games run more closely to 30.
Absolutely.
I think so.
What would you want from a PS3 Pro, John?
I would want them to have worked with NVIDIA to find some way to make G80 compatible.
Yes. G80 is so good. Yeah.
Because, I mean, they were so freaking close to it, though, right? Like, if it had just been based on G80, like the RSX.
It would have been...
game-changing,
nightmarish for Microsoft if they'd had G80 for sure.
Dude,
yeah,
that's true. It would have changed. It would have changed the direction of the industry in a weird way, I'm sure. But it would have been a much, much, much better system. Like
the funny thing is, of course, is that the PlayStation 3 and the Xbox 360 era, there were so many die shrinks that there was actually much more of a viability.
For profying
to having a pro console. They went from like 90 nanometer to like 28, I think, for the RSX from the beginning of the generation to the end. And that's like a gigantic leap in processor technology. So absolutely, they could have done a pro console. They could have delivered something that was far, far superior to the originals. I think it was also like a different world at the time, though. There was the big economic crisis of 2008, 2009 onwards. And so there probably
like today
wasn't
any better, though.
Well, yeah. I was going to say, the $700 console, but there was a $600 console in 2006.
Yeah.
Which is kind of crazy. So yeah, I think they probably would have left the cell as is, maybe with a clock speed bump. They probably could have got away with that. They could have unlocked the 8th SPU because the yield issues would have improved. They could have made a much bigger GPU, but they probably wouldn't have been able to do G80. I just don't think the concept of a pro console was actually on anyone's mind at that time. The basic idea is that a console was a fixed platform that you stick with for, however many years. And that's it. But, obviously things have changed now. But that's what they could have done. The 360 side of things, probably quite similar, right? Extra memory, bigger GPU, faster clocks. But they actually did a lot of great work on the 360. They actually unified the CPU and GPU into a single piece of silicon, which Sony never did with Cell and RSX. So, they did a lot of efficiency savings on 360.
Well, they had a lot of work to do there to save it from red ringing.
Gotta make it work, not explode.
Although the PS3 obviously has major issues as well with the RSX dying. And then you get the yellow light of death.
Yeah.
That's nuts.
Crazy stuff. But yeah, that's what a theoretical PS3 Pro would have looked like. Bigger GPU, more memory, faster clocks. And I think it would have been pretty sweet, but alas, it needed not to be.
Dude, we needed it though more than ever. Games were so bad in terms of performance that generation. Like
there was, yeah, you're quite right. They could have easily done a better model to solve a lot of these issues. Yeah, for sure.
I mean, people still complain about performance today, but I'm like, my dude, if you actually look at the landscape of console games right now, most are actually 60 FPS. Performance is the best it's been in like 2 decades in the console space. It's actually very good overall. The PS3 generation was one of the worst. It was so bad. If you go back to those titles, like I literally laughed out loud when I booted up the 2010 Medal of Honor reboot on the PS3 some years ago, and I'm like, the whole intro scene is like 15 to 25 FPS with like gigantic full screen tearing everywhere, and I'm like, this is what they considered AAA in 2010.
Is that the one with the dude bro?
It's
beard
so
guys
dude bro.
They throw a guy on a chair and he explodes through a door. I remember this intro. I think
it's straight up pathetic, I would say. When you look at that games like that, and there was a lot that run that bad and look the way they do, and you're like, this is garbage. This was so bad. Like, we've come a long way from that. So things may not be perfect now. There's definitely issues, but like, that was a very dark time. And I would say the PS2 era largely holds up better in many ways. Like, there's good performing stuff on the PS3 and 360, but there's a lot of bad stuff there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's funny because we look back at there's kind of like a bit of revisionism going on with the PS3, where it's like obviously the 360 was the better multi-platform machine, but then there is this narrative emerging that it actually got better across the generation, and by the end they were pretty much the same. And whenever we go back and look, it's just not true. The PS3's always behind.
The exclusive PS3 stuff or stuff made for PS3 did get quite good in the end, I would say. But like the multi-platform stuff, no freaking way. Unreal Engine never was good on PS3. It was always like a dog.